the political landscape in Nigeria has been dominated by elite cliques, leaving citizens feeling alienated from the governance processes that directly impact their life. Our aim through this conference is to initiate reform efforts that will strengthen our electoral process and ensure that our leadership selection process is credible. Second, we seek to mobilize and strengthen our political parties. Political parties are the bedrock of any democracy. Yet in Nigeria, they often fall short of the ideals of transparency, accountability, and responsiveness. The focus of this conference includes fostering the development of political parties that are truly representative, open to internal democracy, and accountable to the people. By addressing these issues, we envision political parties that champion the voice and needs of Nigerians, providing viable choices for leadership and governance. Another key reason we are organizing this conference is the need to mobilize citizens for democratic resilience. Democracy is only as strong as the citizens who uphold it. As conveners, we believe that engaging Nigerians at all levels, from grassroots communities to influential stakeholders, is fundamental to creating a resilient democracy. This conference is therefore an avenue to reignite civic engagement, encouraging Nigerians to actively participate in the democratic process and to demand accountability from leaders at every level, local government, state, and federal. Through such mobilization, we aim to foster a culture of informed citizens with the power to shape and safeguard our democracy. Finally, this conference serves as a platform for building sustainable partnerships and strategies for democratic renewal. Nigeria's democracy will only flourish when backed by a collaborative approach that brings together government institutions, civil society, media, and citizens. Through the discussions, panels, and technical sessions planned over the next 2 days, we will establish a network of partnerships and actionable commitments that will drive us towards a shared vision. So we'll envisage that there will be actionable commitment for the government, executive, legislature, judiciary, INEC, the security agencies, civil society, the private sector, and indeed all key stakeholders that can help us to strengthen democracy in Nigeria. The outcomes from this conference will provide a solid foundation on which we can rebuild confidence in our institutions. One of the sections will deal with rebuilding confidence in the executive, rebuilding confidence in the legislature, rebuilding confidence in the judiciary, and rebuilding confidence in INEC. From this conference, we anticipate several important outcomes. 3 are critical. Number 1 is increased public awareness and engagement. Through the insights and knowledge shared here, we aim to enhance public understanding of the critical need for democratic reform. We hope this will inspire active citizen participation, both in this campaign and in governance at large. Secondly, strengthen institutions and accountability by discussing and advocating for robust electoral and constitutional reform. We look forward to a more transparent electoral process. We hope that we reignite the debate and dialogue on how to restore confidence in the executive, legislature, judiciary, and INEC. Finally, renewed confidence in democracy. It is our ultimate hope that this conference will renew the public's trust in our democratic system. By setting actionable steps for the future, we seek to empower Nigerians to believe in the possibility of transformative and visionary leadership. In conclusion, I want to remind us all that the success of Nigeria's democracy lies in our hands. This conference is just the beginning for us, the conveners, of a sustained effort to rebuild our democracy. We must commit ourselves to active engagement, persistent advocacy, and unwavering dedication to the principles of accountability, integrity, and transparency. I invite each one of you to participate fully in the discussions and sections, to bring your insights, experiences, and ideas forward. Let us build on this opportunity, not just for ourselves, but for generations to come. Together, let us renew our commitment to a Nigeria where democracy thrives, where institutions are strong, and where every citizen's voice is heard and respected. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, sir. As we proceed with the program, we would like to recognize the presence of some of our distinguished guests that joined us during the speech. We want to recognize the presence of the former Minister of Sports, Honorable Bolaji Abdullahi. Please go and put our hands together for him. Also joining us here, we have Minister of Mines and Steel Development in person of Honorable Bawa Buhari, former Minister of Mines and Steel Development, I beg your pardon, in person of Honorable Bawa Buhari. Please can we put our hands together for him. Also here present at this event, we recognize the presence of the former presidential candidate, COA 2019, in person of Dr. Adeshino Fagbinro Byron. Please can we put our hands together for him. And still here present with us, we recognize the presence of Professor Joy Ngozi Ezelio, the former SAN, the former Commissioner for Gender and Social Development in Enugu State. Please let us put our hands together for them as we proceed with the program.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the next segment of our program. Our keynote speaker is the former Vice President of the Federal Republic of Ghana, serving from 2017 to 2025. As vice president, he chaired the economic management team, playing a pivotal role in shaping government policies and ensuring their effective implementation. A champion of digital transformation, he spearheaded a comprehensive strategy to leverage digitized government services for public sector reform and economic growth. Our keynote speaker holds a Bachelor of Science degree in economics from Buckingham University, UK, a Master of Science degree in development economics from Oxford University, UK, and a PhD in economics from Simon Fraser University in Canada. It's okay to clap, it's free. Renowned for his innovative leadership, he is celebrated as one of the most transformational vice presidents in Ghana's history, having introduced and led several impactful policies. In November 2023, he was overwhelmingly elected as the flag bearer of the new Patriotic Party (NPP) for the 2024 elections, though his party did not prevail in the general election. And it is important to state here that even though his party did not prevail, he was, in quote, gracious enough to concede defeat even before the elections were fully announced. And that's what we think Africa needs. Our keynote speaker is widely admired for his humility, his honesty, hard work, and compassion. He's also admired for his loyalty and vision, traits that continue to guide his impactful contributions to public service, economics, and governance. He remains a respected global voice in economic and governance discussions. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome His Excellency, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, former Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, to the podium. We can do better than that, please. Your Excellency, sir. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, MC, for those very kind words. Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, represented by His Excellency Dr. Hakeem Baba Ahmed, political advisor, governors and former governors here present, former ministers and ministers, Executive Director of the African Center for Leadership Strategy and Development, the immediate past majority leader of Ghana's Parliament and the Minister for Parliamentary Affairs, representatives from the CDD, WFD, PACA, National Peace Committee, who are the conveners of this conference, the speakers and panelists, civil society organizations, the media, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first thank the organizers and conveners of this very important meeting for the excellent choice on the important topic of strengthening Nigeria's democracy under the theme Pathways to Good Governance and Political Integrity. This couldn't have been more appropriate given recent political developments in Nigeria and other countries. In fact, this theme of strengthening democracy is globally topical and will be just as relevant in countries like the United States of America, South Africa, South Korea, Mozambique, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Ghana, to mention a few. Ladies and gentlemen, Between 2020 and 2023, there have been about 8 coups d'etats in Africa. A few leaders have also changed or are changing their constitutions to allow them to stay in power beyond their constitutionally mandated terms. The increasing fragility of democracy in Africa and across the world is cause for concern. In democratic countries, the will of the people is expressed through elections, and leaders, especially incumbents, must trust the electoral process and accept the will of the people for the survival of democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, the year 2024 has been described as the year of political disruption because out of elections held in 60 countries, incumbents lost 80% of the elections, largely on account of increased cost of living following the COVID pandemic, amongst other reasons. We have seen major examples of this political disruption in countries like South Africa, the United Kingdom, the USA, Japan, India, Sierra Leone, Botswana, and Senegal, to mention a few. In Ghana, the presidential and parliamentary elections were held just last month. As an incumbent vice president, I was also the ruling party candidate for the presidency. Before the election, there was the usual anxiety expressed by the opposition as well as the diplomatic community. And we have this expression of anxiety virtually in every election. But there was this anxiety expressed by the diplomatic community and the opposition about the transparency, credibility, and fairness of the impending election. The opposition claimed that government had a plan to rig the election. I believe this is a standard claim by all opposition parties in any election in Africa. Frankly, notwithstanding the above, I, as the presidential candidate of my party, I was confident in Ghana's electoral process, as the Electoral Commission had demonstrated over time fairness and transparency. In fact, in Ghana, we spent quite a lot of time on electoral reform over the years. In addition to this, I was confident of winning the election on December 7th, based on what I considered to be the solid record of achievement, notwithstanding the economic challenges we faced. However, when the polls closed on December 7th and counting began, we started receiving the results from our party's collation centers. We had set up a very elaborate scheme of collating our results, and we started receiving the results from our collation sectors. By 3 a.m. on Sunday, because the election was on Saturday, it was obvious from the data that we had received from our collation centers that my opponent, the former president and now president, John Dramani Mahama, had decisively won the election. I knew, so by 3 a.m. had begun to mount. I therefore took the decision to hold a press conference at 9 a.m. the next morning. I asked for them to call the press the next morning at 9 a.m. to concede the election to my opponent, even before the EC had announced and collated the results. You can imagine how incredulous some of even my team members were about my decision to do this. They said, we have to wait for the EC. And I said, our data collation, I believe, is correct. The EC will not have any different data from what we have collected. So I believed that my concession within 14 hours of the close of the polls was in the supreme interest of Ghana's democracy and peace. The people had decided, and we had to respect their decision without any equivocation. A politician's ambition must, and I repeat, must never supersede the interest of your nation. Ambition can always be seen for a politician in two dimensions. You have a personal ambition, but you also have an ambition for your country. Most of the time, when we talk of ambition, we are only talking about personal ambition. The ambition for the country is relegated. We don't talk about ambition. When you ask somebody what is your ambition, it's usually coming up about personal ambition. But for a politician, you face these two dimensions of ambition. The ambition for yourself and the ambition for your country. For democracy to survive and to thrive and to be strengthened, the ambition for the country must be paramount and must supersede the ambition for yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, elections are not do or die affairs. That's what we must understand. The right of the citizenry to choose leaders in a free, transparent manner is sacrosanct and remains one of the most vital anchors of a true democratic dispensation. By choosing and/or changing leaders through the ballot box, though necessary, is not sufficient to guarantee a true flourishing democratic culture. Ladies and gentlemen, there are several other imperatives, including the often taken for granted issues that, when combined with peaceful and credible elections, enrich and sustain our democracy. I therefore propose to continue with the rest of my speech by looking at the common threats to our democracy, and then proceed to suggest, in my opinion, the things we can do to grow a democratic culture that is resilient enough to deliver governance, economic, and social dividends. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most important determinants of a flourishing democracy is the quality of institutions. Institutions capable of guaranteeing rights, including property rights, and checking the wanton abuse of power. These institutions include the independent election management bodies, the judiciary, the ombudsman, the police, the other law enforcement agencies, and many others. One of the most topical issues about economic growth. And as an economist, I follow this literature closely. One of the most important topical issues about economic growth that has been extensively discussed by development economists is the now famous institutions versus geography debate. Celebrated economists like Daniel Roderick have come up to the firm conclusion that when it comes to the determinants of growth, the quality of institutions towers above everything else. Unfortunately, whilst the culture of peacefully choosing leaders is being entrenched, these institutions that should determine our growth are becoming weak and endangered. Several reasons account for this. First, when we place partisan, ethnic, and other interests over and above competence in appointments to these institutions, we are simply creating mere edifices and structures to reward cronies, creating avenues for reluctant Democrats to get a backdoor route to autocracy and misgovernance. Second, there is a growing phenomenon in our democracy whereby people deliberately run down these independent and accountability institutions purely on emotive reasons, especially when these institutions decide, as they should, to uphold the law in the interest of the masses and in strict fidelity to the law. Ladies and gentlemen, it is rather alarming that sometimes these bastardizations of the institutions are undertaken by people with loud voices, people with professional and technical pedigrees, and people who know the truth as espoused by these institutions. For these people, partisan and sectional interests are often packaged as technical and professional opinions, thereby setting up these institutions up for public ridicule, scorn, and disdain. This has often set the stage for people with no appreciation of the issues at stake to run amok, eroding public confidence in these institutions and causing substantial damage to our democracy. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I need to touch on a closely related matter to the quality of institutions. Indeed, it is an extension of that point. It is about what we used to know in the past. In times when democracy was threatened, it was usually the case that a group of people with a known leader would take up arms and assume control of state power and institutions. The group or its leader would proceed to abolish elections, ultimately collapse democracy, and declare a dictatorship. This is gradually giving way, even though a few spots still exist for this path to toppling the democratic order, as we have seen in the sub-region recently. In place of that is an orchestrated hollowing out of democratic structures and processes and taking full control of the state and related organs, making it nearly impossible for the political opposition to win elections. This is a potent way to bury democracy by placing form over substance and depriving democracy of its essential functions. Ladies and gentlemen, in other words, the form is democratic, but the substance is obdurate dictatorship. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest threats to democracy today is what I call the next meal principle. Before I make my point, I need to re-echo the words of one of Africa's greatest sons, the distinguished Nelson Mandela, who said that as long as poverty, injustice, and gross inequality exist in our world, none of us can truly rest, end quote. Democracy must be a means to an end. The best democracy is the one that delivers public goods and services effectively and efficiently and creates opportunities for citizens whilst making conscious efforts to leave no one behind. For sub-Saharan Africa, the data suggests that we do not have an option to do nothing. In 2024, the World Bank estimated that 2/3 of the world's population live in extreme poverty in sub-Saharan Africa. Back home, here, the World Bank's 2024 review reveals that more than half of Nigerians live in multidimensional poverty. For Nigeria, and indeed much of sub-Saharan Africa, our work is cut out for us. We need to take decisive actions to demonstrate that to govern is to advance the interests and welfare of the people. We need to reconfigure our economic systems, processes, and institutions in a manner that prioritizes the next meal for the majority of our people. For far too long, the focus has been on ticking the boxes on democratic institutions, much to the neglect of what those institutions have been able to produce for the ordinary citizen. The person who is unable to afford the next Eba meal is unlikely to appreciate any data on democratic progress. Ladies and gentlemen, there is growing apprehension among the citizenry about the relevance and usefulness of government institutions, with many people losing faith in these institutions. This is concerning and portends a bleak future for democratic sustenance if we do not rise to the occasion, and quickly too. For our democracy to remain relevant and sustainable, actors need to ensure that citizens have confidence in the democratic system to address their needs and concerns, particularly basic needs, which I call the next meal principle. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I now turn attention to a matter right in front of us, and which we continue surprisingly to downplay. I'm talking about the youth demography, or what is known in modern speak as the Gen Z demographic, and the potential of a growing youthful population to make or unmake democracy. Across the world, we have seen young people stand up to dictatorial or malfunctional governance architectures, bringing in ugly outcomes in certain cases. These have often happened because young people are considered the next generation and have a bounden duty to ensure that the actions we take today do not jeopardize their future. Viewed from that lens, one is tempted to say young people have played key roles in rescuing failing democratic systems by confronting and defying dictatorships or systems that are no longer fit for purpose. But there is a catch, ladies and gentlemen. We know that the youth demographic is not necessarily homogeneous, and that comes with some challenges. In many cases, some young people have rather helped misgovernance to fester by becoming proxies to perpetuate injustice and or obstruct the smooth functioning of systems that will promote good governance. So I've presented two scenarios: the youth as enablers of democratic sustenance and the youth as outlets for misgovernance. But whichever lens one views this, the real pointer can only be one thing. We need to ensure that democracy delivers inclusive opportunities. the productive energies of our young people need to be harnessed properly to empower them to play positive roles in democratic sustenance. Whilst we ponder over this suggestion, I want to share, once again, some figures from the 2023 Open Society Barometer report with you. When I read this report, I was shocked to find out that 30% and 38% of young people in Nigeria and Ghana, respectively, said army rule was good for the citizenry. Yes, that's quite high. That is food for thought. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot talk about a deepening democratic culture without devoting time to the role of the citizen. Have we played our roles in sustaining democracy? To answer this question, I'd first borrow some lines from President Barack Obama. And he says, and I quote, "The role of the citizen in our democracy does not end with your vote," end quote. Deepening and sustaining our democracy will require that citizens step up to the plate and show a greater voice, a voice that is long on policy coherence and strengthening systems, and a voice that is short on rhetoric and plain political partisan verbiage. In that way, we can hold political office holders accountable for their actions and teleguide governance efforts towards strengthening and consolidating democratic governance. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm expanding the citizen discussion to include politicians and political office holders. This group has a primary duty to demonstrate commitment to growing a democratic dispensation that upholds rights and delivers benefits to citizens. They must eschew corruption, nepotism, and the power at all costs posture. Any politician or national leader that threatens fire and brimstone while seeking power is not looking to serve the people. Such a politician is seeking power for ulterior motives. This category of politicians threatens our democracy. For our democracy to succeed and remain useful for the citizenry, ladies and gentlemen, we require a new set of leaders. Leaders who place national interests over and above individual parochial interests. Leaders who have no political integrity should not be in politics. The generality of citizens must ensure that we consign greedy politicians to the basket of irrelevance and project selfless and generational thinkers to the front row of leadership and service. Citizens owe this duty to themselves, God, and the country. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me summarize a few of the points that I've made. First, in terms of sustaining democracy, strengthening it. First, we must recognize that democracy is more than casting ballots and declaring winners and losers. We must work to strengthen independent, constitutional, and democratic institutions. The time spent and the resources spent to strengthen our independent, constitutional, and democratic institutions will be very worth it. It's really going to be huge for Nigeria and other countries to spend the resources and time to strengthen independent, constitutional, and democratic institutions. They represent the fuel on which the engines of democracy run. Second, ladies and gentlemen, we should prioritize the next meal principle in configuring democratic systems and processes. A democracy that cannot deliver broad-based prosperity to all sections of society to all sections of society. With your permission, ladies and gentlemen, that type of democracy is a democracy. Let us prioritize inclusive economic growth and opportunities, bearing in mind that democracy is a means to an end and not an end in itself. Third, citizens need to play their part in holding duty bearers and political office holders to account by bringing relevant facts and information and well thought through ideas and suggestions to the forefront of national discourse. In effect, the watchdog role of citizens, if devoid of misinformation, fake news, and partisan narratives, can go a long way to sustain a culture of democratic governance. Fourth, ladies and gentlemen, let us direct and harness the positive energy of young people in a way that creates opportunities for them to realize their potential and to reduce their vulnerability to being deployed by predatory forces for ruinous causes. The youth can make or unmake our democracy. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, strengthening democracy is not an event. It will require sustained efforts collectively applied to multiple sectors, institutions, and structures. Nigeria has been a leader for many years on many fronts, not only in sub-Saharan Africa, but across the globe. At the sub-regional level, Nigeria has played a father-figure role in economic support and diplomacy, peacekeeping, and restoring democracy in some instances. It is expected that the steady progress being made in democratic governance will be strengthened and sustained. We therefore need to work assiduously to strengthen democracy by staying true to its prerequisites. Despite the imperfections of democracy, it remains the preferred form of governance that can guarantee individual liberties and rights. Prime Minister Winston Churchill beautifully summarized this point in a line that said, and I quote, "Democracy is the worst form of government except for all others," unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2023 Open Society Barometer report also established that 92% of Nigerians say it is important to live in a democratically governed country, with a further 69% settling on democracy as the preferred form of government. This leaves nobody in doubt that democracy has taken root in Nigeria. Let us therefore strengthen it. I thank you for the opportunity. May God bless Nigeria. May God bless Africa and all of us. Thank you very, very much.
I believe we can keep clapping. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir, our special guest of honor, for that brilliant keynote address. May we all be seated. Some of the key take-homes from this talk, some of the key take-homes that we have here from this talk: a politician's ambition must never override the country's ambition. Also, he made good note to point out that to strengthen democracy, we must stay true to its prerequisites. Very strong words coming from His Excellency Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. Very quickly, while our special guest of honor was speaking, we had some people join us in the room. I would like to quickly make special recognition. We would like to recognize at this time the distinguished Senator Biodun Olujimi, former Deputy Governor, Ekiti State. Please can we put our hands together for him? Also, we'd like to very quickly recognize, for her, I beg your pardon, I beg your pardon, I beg your pardon. Thank you very much for the correction. His Excellency Abdul Fatai Ahmed, former Governor of Kwara State. Also joining us here, we have Ambassador Nkoyo Toyo, former Nigeria ambassador to Ethiopia. Please, can we put our hands together for her? Can we rise for recognition? All right. Joining us also, we have Ambassador Dr. Aderemi Ajibewa, who is representing the DGNIPSS, that's the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies. Please, may we rise for recognition? All right. Joining us also, we have Dr. Kole Shetima with us from MacArthur Foundation. He is here present. Please come and put our hands together for him. And of course, joining us, we have more distinguished guests, our CSO representatives. We have Tokpe Fashola, the country director, Christian Aid. Sir, please, could you rise for recognition? Thank you, sir. You're welcome. We also have the country director, Action Aid, Nigeria, Mr. Andrew Mamedu. Sir, could you please rise for recognition very quickly? All right, we can see you there to the far right. We also would like to recognize in front Miriam Uwais, who is a faculty of the Center LSD Leadership School. Thank you very much, Ma, for joining us. We also like to recognize Dr. Dauda Garba, who is a director from the Center of Democracy and Development. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll make more recognitions as time progresses. But very quickly, we would like to move to the next item on the agenda, which is a paper presentation. And this paper is titled Democracy in Nigeria, Challenges, Prospects, and the 2027 Elections. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, please join me as we invite the Director for Center of Democracy and Development in person of Professor Jibrin Ibrahim to present this paper. Please can we put our hands together as he makes his way on stage. Please let's keep clapping as he comes up on stage.
Your Excellencies, civil society colleagues, and believers in democracy. Just before I was introduced, the MC introduced the director of the Center for Democracy and Development. A second later, she introduced me again as the director of the Center for Democracy and Development. And I think we don't have two directors of the center. But then, MCs today are very powerful. I've had one of them declare Ghana to be a federal republic. So it's your day, and it's a democracy. Can do what you want. I think the conference we are attending is a very important one because of the significant challenges facing democracy, not just in our country, Nigeria, but around the world. This week is a very sad one for democracy in West Africa, as 3 countries are likely to quit our regional organization, ECOWAS, and the core reason they want to leave is that they came to power in flagrant violation of the zero tolerance to change of power through unconstitutional means in their countries of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. And therefore, what is pushing them out of ECOWAS is their decision to opt out of democracy. And I think it's, in a sense, a very dramatic moment for all of us, because we know what it took for the struggle to ensure democracy becomes the normative system for all the countries in West Africa. The former Vice President of Ghana has made a very important point about the Open Society Barometer that pointed out significant increase in support for military coups, especially among young West Africans. We have followed with keen interest the way in which these three countries have engaged in an open war against ECOWAS because they feel their survival as dictatorships would be dependent on their continuing to question the relevance and utility of democracy in the region. The crisis of democracy is not just a West African problem. Increasingly, the world over, populist regimes are emerging and are openly campaigning for the dismemberment of democracy, at least in terms of emptying it of its contents. We've just seen the arrival of Donald Trump in the United States, but also the way his new government is already reaching out to support fascist and authoritarian regimes the world over, and their attempt to realign world politics, to deepen authoritarianism, to challenge democracy, and to reestablish the rights of people who exercise power to engage in arbitrary rule and do what they want. I feel this is a serious challenge for the entire world at this point. And the spirit of this conference, as Otive has explained, is for all of us that are committed to democracy and its values to rally around, to defend it, not because it is an idea we like, but as the Ghanaian Vice President says, it is something that has value for citizens because its promise, because its essence is to improve the public good. And it is this linkage between democracy and the public good that's the core reason why it must be supported, it must be defended whenever it encounters challenges. In a sense, the call we are making over these 2 days is for believers in the democracy project to mobilize themselves, organize themselves, and do all in its power to make sure the current threats to democracy are defeated or at the very least, contained. I think the point about democratic system is that the bulk of citizens are very conscious that democracy is something that empowers them if it works correctly. After all, it is what gives them the ultimate power to determine who governs and with what political project. It is therefore always been a very powerful idea and something for which so many people over the ages have fought and struggled for. Every society, however, does have people who are not part of the believers of democracy, but are people who are interested in the perquisites of power. And I think for a lot of them, their notion of engagement in politics is to have access to the power that democracy is supposed to provide without it lose its essence and above all, what it can.
Tune in to Mighty K Online. Mighty K TV, it is possible. Tune in to Mighty K Online. Mighty K TV, it is possible.
Thank you. Thank you very much, MC, for those very kind words. The Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, represented by His Excellency Dr. Hakeem Baba Ahmed, political advisor, governors and former governors here present, former ministers and ministers, Executive Director of the African Center for Leadership Strategy and Development, the immediate past majority leader of Ghana's Parliament and the Minister for Parliament and the Minister for Parliamentary Affairs, representatives from the CDD, WFD, Parker, National Peace Committee, who are the conveners of this conference.
Tune in to Mighty K Online. Mighty K TV, it is possible. Tune in to Mighty K Online. Mighty K TV, it is possible. Tune in to Mighty K Online. Mighty K TV. It is possible. Tune in to Mighty K Online.